use of painting by the church to reinforce the church's institutional authority. Well, I lied. We're going to do that next week. So, but I will remind you that.
Church.
So I will remind you, we will revisit this very important subject, which is using art to kind of reinforce the church. When I say church, I mean, capital C, Catholic Church, and this is definitely a great example of that. We saw that last week. But when we talk about Michelangelo and Raphael, especially Michelangelo, he's really, patronized by the church. You can't really separate him from the institution of the church, particularly because he was an architect. He did a lot of work on St. Peter's, and he's definitely one of my favorite artists. And I think he achieves a level of notoriety that allows him to kind of push some buttons and push the boundaries that other artists can't quite achieve without controversy. So today we're going to talk about Leonardo da Vinci. I'm sure you guys have heard of him. For some reason, they couldn't call the Ninja Turtle Da Vinci. They had to call him Leonardo. I guess Da Vinci was too weird for kids to pronounce. But, Leonardo da Vinci was not actually, that's not his last name. That was he's like a bastard child. So it would have been, Leonardo Snow if you were in, Game of Thrones. So Da Vinci is just the name of where he was from. So he comes from very modest origins. And we're going to talk about him exclusively today. Have you guys heard about Da Vinci being in the news at all? And one of his paintings has kind of been the subject of a lot of controversy or interest. Have you guys heard about that at all? Anyone?
About what?
Okay, good. Pardon me?
About what?
The Salvador Mundi painting, particularly.
The one that might not be.
Yeah, the one that might. That'll be a running thread in our class today. Not that we're gonna find out conclusively whether or not he painted it, but I think it's worth considering other ramifications of the picture. Why perhaps he might have distanced himself from ownership or other factors, and I think that's maybe a good place to start, which is with the Protestant Revolution. Are we already set? And thank you, Bruce, again for everything. So I think we have we were originally going to have one more class, and we're going to add more because I think we need to cover our bases a little more. So I want to make sure we have a few more classes where we talk about the conquest of the New World and using Christian art to convert a lot of the Native Americans, but also, of course, to talk more about Christian art into the late Renaissance and a little beyond. So we're probably going to extend the class a few more classes. So I hope we have enough popcorn for that. Or they have enough popcorn for that.
Or cookies.
Or cookies, whichever may be the case. So next week we will talk more about the Catholic Church, the role of art and reinforcing the Catholic Church. You mentioned last week pregnant women. I just wanted to point out real fast. Here is another picture.
I was thinking of.
Okay, very good. Yeah, this is a very famous picture. We kind of already talked about it, so you missed it too late. And next week we'll talk more about Michelangelo, Raphael, and the church. Not just art, but also, of course, architecture and building a new church that's sort of bigger than ever. You guys probably heard of St. Peter's. And Bernini adds that giant colonnade. It's like a big claw to grab people like a hungry hippo to bring people back into the church. Literally, you guys know what I'm talking about. Huge colonnade in front of the St. Peter's. It's like this huge kind of plaza, and it really looks like either embracing arms, not like hungry hippo, of course, but it's sort of literally designed to bring you into the church. And why were people going away from the church? Well, several reasons. The Black Death, as we talked about a few classes ago, that was a big thing that made people question the church a lot more. But of course, the big thing is the church has another sort of threat facing it. Not Islam. What is the other threat from the Catholic Church, facing the Catholic Church at this time?
Protestant.
Very good. And I think that's really, this church is, of course, in the tradition of Protestantism. So it's very important to kind of understand that division. And of course, now, even though, as I said last week, Protestantism doesn't necessarily, you don't associate that with art as much as Catholicism. It's not that they don't have a kind of positive relationship. It's more that Protestantism needed to distinguish itself from Catholicism, right? So that's really important to understand that a lot of this artwork, I think particularly something like this, might have been seen as, this is for the church. This is helping the church and not necessarily getting you closer to God. Now, that's debatable, of course, but that's important to understand that we have this kind of background noise of Protestantism, maybe I shouldn't say noise, background music of Protestantism emerging, and you got to be careful with your analogies. And I think that's really important. So what do you guys know about Protestantism? What is the nature of Martin Luther, right? His not Martin Luther King. Every semester at UT, I get a few students who are like, I say, who is Martin Luther? That's a civil rights leader. They have themselves in the back. Sometimes you wish they would Google or ChatGPT more, right?
They can do it in class.
They Google their ChatGPT. No, all my students use ChatGPT to write their papers last semester. So there's definitely going to be some soul searching at the universities about how to bring that in, because no good. It's not unlike the corruption in the Catholic Church. It's the same thing. Corruption really very quickly causes people's faith in institutions to decline. So the Catholic Church, what's the criticism of the Catholic Church?
Oh, I was going to the other one.
Okay, that's fine. I love segue. I love like detours.
Protestantism was all about access. For the first time, access.
Okay, access. Access to what?
Access to everything. They get access to God, but access to the liturgy, access to the reading.
Right.
And may I just say, there's a lot to be done with the printing press
Right, the printing. How does that relate to access, the printing press?
They were able to expand the whole access to everything.
Right, so being able to mass produce the Bible, printing it, having movable type and all that. I guess they laboriously placed every letter. They'd saved that, so it's a lot of work. But they didn't have all those distractions back then. Anyway, the book is really important because it gives people this direct access to the Word of God. And of course, you can't read the Bible unless you can't have the Bible unless you can read it. So with printing the Bible comes greater literacy, and of course, with greater literacy means people have access to knowledge, not just the Bible, but other things. And you have a movement called humanism, which I think is an effort to kind of focus on the beauty and perfection of humanity as a function of religion and God and spirituality. So I think that's really the heart of Da Vinci's sort of contribution to what we're going to talk about, kind of trying to reconcile maybe the division between man and God and find a more perfect union between the two, informed by some humanism, but also being able to read sources directly and not rely on the church or the priest to kind of interpret things for you or to tell you how they are. And I think we all can relate to that, because going directly to something means you bypass the middle person, and then you can get a cheaper price sometimes, or you don't get any of that propaganda or whatever. So what else? So Martin Luther has like the 72 Theses he posts on the wall of the church in Germany. So this is the Northern European kind of protest that filters down, and I'm sure when the Pope heard about it, no. What are they doing up in Germany? What are they doing? No. So this is definitely kind of related to the division between North and South in Europe. There's definitely kind of an underlying division culturally between what's going on up north, what's going on down south. You remember also we talked last week about how Italy, having lost Constantinople, at least Christianity's lost Constantinople as another major part of the religion, now they have to kind of affirm their own classical roots. And this is a chance for Italy to finally say, oh, let's rediscover these antiquities we have all around us and affirm our sort of heritage. So there's definitely that going on as well. But today I want to focus mainly on Protestantism. And I think we kind of covered the big things, but I think I should mention too, what is the criticism of Martin Luther? Somewhat nepotism, I think, was one part of it, the corruption of the church. What was the big one? They were building St. Peter's with money, right? So they would collect.
They were selling.
Right, sale of indulgences, right?
Yeah.
Right, so good. I'm glad we remember our high school AP or European history class. That was the coin in the coffer rings. Anyone remember that part? A soul from purgatory springs. Like that was the. See how genius the Catholic, priest. Like, I got a great zingy one-liner that'll get all the money. Will shake the people down for money. And of course, when you look at St. Peter's next week, we'll see it. Has anyone been to St. Peter's? Okay, so quite a few. So what's it like when you get there? Like huge, like beyond huge, like almost like heaven on earth. The scale is so big, and you got these little icons on top, almost like they're greeting you on your way into heaven. The columns are so big, and it's so big that you look at it, you're like, Jesus, how much did we spend all this money on this church? And Jesus says, well, I'm not going to stay out of this one. So I'm going to keep my hands off of this one. They painted all these pictures of me. I got to, split the hair. So anyway, so the sale of indulgences, I think, is really important, because people look at this huge church and they think, well, this becomes a symbol of some of the corruption of the church. They think, well, you're spending all this money on the building. What about sort of just ground level faith and the average person? So I think there's a legitimate concern, but remember, it's not just the Pope who feels maybe threatened or the church itself. It's also the individual artists who have to kind of decide, well, how do I fit into this worldview? And I think especially when we get to Michelangelo, he'll be the artist who feels a real conflict about his Catholicism and Protestantism, because I think he understands there's a new wave of value coming from Protestantism that is at odds with Catholicism, and so he will, I think, try to, make good with God according to this stuff, and we'll see that when we get to the Last Judgment. Because I think in the end, the Last Judgment by Michelangelo, the very famous one in the Sistine Chapel, is a criticism of the church, which not many people see it that way, but I think that would be an interesting way to interpret it. And today we're going to have another little kind of hot take, my hot take on the Salvator Mundi, which is this one here. Here we are. So this has been subject of a lot of controversy because a lot of people dispute the origin, the provenance, who painted it. And I can't say I have any expertise on Da Vinci. I've heard a lot of debate one way or the other. But let me hear from you guys first. What do you notice when you look at this? And we're going to revisit this. So this is just kind of getting you your feet wet about him. So what do you notice when you look at this? Anything stand out? What, pardon me?
Very early trans.
Is it a man or a woman?
So kind of vaguely androgynous. You guys remember Pat?
Yeah.
It's time for androgyny.
Pat and Terry.
Maybe less androgynous than Pat, but certainly I agree. There's a kind of a softness to him, a softness to the face especially.
I noticed the fingers.
Pardon me?
I noticed the hands and the fingers. I think they're just very unique.
Yeah, I think the hands, the more I look at it, the more the hands, and not to say that, I think you could say the face is intentionally soft, but the hands are a lot more crisp and
They're very
really
crisp.
almost like photographic in their
Uh-huh.
detail and just realism.
And
now,
most men didn't, also their costume, once again,
the which?
most men did not wear a sort of a sweetheart collar like that.
Yeah, and which part? The tunic?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like,
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It does almost look like a feminine kind of, a little showy. Jesus, a little showy. And we did see earlier, I think we saw some examples of Jesus being very feminized in the early versions of him, like in the mosaics. But that was kind of them struggling to figure out how to portray Jesus. Here it's almost like Da Vinci's now kind of like, well, let me go back to there and kind of reimagine him. And this is very, very good that you say this because I think that might, and that's might in between asterisks, might be part of the explanation for why this has kind of disappeared in history and now reemerged, and there's a lot of dispute because it could be related to this Protestant Catholic thing, which I'll get back to again, kind of my hot take on it. But yeah, so the outfit's a little more feminine. I'd say his face is a little more feminine. What else would you say about it?
The hair and the chin are the things that come up for me because like his hair starts more like wiry, and then as you get down, it becomes more defined curls. And as somebody with curly hair, it takes a long time to get your curls to look that good.
Like this is a
Those are good curls.
like a Vidal Sassoon commercial,
Legitimately jealous.
Let me
of those
bless you
curls.
and your hair will be as awesome as mine kind of thing.
Yeah.
No, there is.
And like the chin almost looks Europeanish to me.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't know, another term for it, but that split, like they call it butt chin.
Yeah, interesting.
Clef.
Yeah, interesting. No, the hair, and Da Vinci has a lot of drawing where he's, really finally understanding the nature of curls, and they go clockwise or counterclockwise. And there's a lot of detail on the hair, and of course the tunic too. A lot of detail there. So it's definitely impressive. They have kind of looked underneath it. They found there's some, he changed the thumb. So there is some evidence that suggests that it wasn't just sort of a copy, that it actually was someone trying to work through it and figure out. But whether or not it was Da Vinci or one of his pupils, one of the people in the workshop, that's the subject or the nature of the debate. What else would you say about it?
It's kind of shadowy, right?
So the black background, that's good you point that out because that'll be something we see more moving forward. And I think you could look at that in a few ways. One, it's a lot easier to paint when you don't have to paint the background. So number one, it saves you a lot of work. But also, what does it do? And this goes back to kind of my hot take on this painting. Like, what's the relationship to Jesus here? Between the viewer, you, and Jesus?
Undistracted.
One-on-one.
One-on-one, very good. I think that's really, the nature, the heart of this picture, that you brought Jesus right up into your intimate sort of circle, and there's nothing else there except Jesus. So it's really like you and Jesus, and it's just you and Jesus.
Right.
There's no church.
Protestantism.
Right, very
That's
good.
the whole point. You
Right.
have a pope between
Right.
Jesus
Right,
and us.
very good. So we're gonna kind of get back to that as we move forward, and I think that might, for me, I think that's just a lovely way of thinking about why this painting has controversy, because it goes right to the heart of this issue of, do you have someone who presents Jesus to you, or do you directly talk to Jesus? And I don't know if that's true, but I like to think that maybe Leonardo painted this, or whoever painted this, and the church was like, we need some intermediary. We need to sell some indulgences kind of thing. Now, that's just a hot take, but we'll kind of continue pursuing that thread a little forward as we move forward today. So let's get back to this and kind of look at some more of Da Vinci's work, because I think it's worth comparing this to some other stuff we saw. Now, this is not a Da Vinci painting, but this is another version of Jesus we saw that I think personalizes him. We saw this last week, and makes it very, relatable. He's almost like you're there with Jesus, almost like you're at, Tampa General Hospital. Like, it really makes it very relatable. It takes him from the cross or from Mary's lap and brings him into a very human sort of relationship with the people. And now remember, the Renaissance is this kind of very, maybe not as brief as, well, depending on how you define brief, but some people really think of it several centuries. I think it really is just the real heart of the Renaissance, this very narrow window, late 1400s, early 1500s. Now, as you notice, other things are going on in the world, right? We've got Columbus discovering America at this time. So just imagine being alive, knowing there's this whole new continent of discovery taking place. I mean,
You got the Pope fathering children.
what else do we have?
The Pope fathering children.
The Pope fathered children? What
Fathering.
Fathering.
What is fathering?
Having babies.
Oh, having babies. Okay, yeah, it's like
Spawning.
spawning, being fruitful,
Should we
yes,
get
and
more
multiply.
scientific?
Right.
So this is Da Vinci's earliest painting from when he was. How old do you think he was when he painted this?
14.
No, but very good, 20. I was very impressed when I heard that. So I think you can see he's got this masterful. And remember, we saw a bunch of Annunciations, and this was, I think we could agree, the most sort of safe, the least suggestive. She's outside, reading the Bible in public, viewed from everyone, like on her porch in Hyde Park kind of thing. And the mailman comes over and says, you got a package delivery, and of course it's more than that. And she's like, oh yes, right here.
Amazon.
And this is the moment when the angel is informing her that she's pregnant. So clearly Da Vinci is a Catholic, and he uses his art to reinforce his Catholicism and to kind of, but also of course to tell the story of this important doctrine in Christianity, which is the Immaculate Conception. So this is seeing is believing. Seeing this take place reinforces people's feelings that, okay, this is actually a real thing, and not just something the church is saying to me. I can see it literally before my eyes. And compare that with Botticelli's version, and I think you can see Da Vinci has a different kind of style. It's a lot more. Well, how would you compare it? Here's Botticelli. Here's Da Vinci. How would you compare their styles?
Botticelli is a little more fulsome.
A little more.
Bright, fulsome.
Yeah,
Brighter
yeah.
Colors.
Yeah.
Younger people.
A lot louder, brighter, more boisterous, perhaps. And I think Da Vinci is what?
Solemn.
Solemn, subdued,
Serene.
subtle. Yeah, I mean, I tend to be a little more like Botticelli just overall in my life. But I respect any of this kind of Da Vinci quality. But what I see is definitely two artists who probably hated each other. What are you, too much red? Too much gray, whatever. But I do think they have very different personalities. So it's fun to kind of, this is Botticelli.
Yeah.
And remember, we talked about how this is kind of definitely not a Christian painting, but it does have kind of almost a veiled effort to reconcile Christianity with paganism, or at least filter paganism through a kind of Christian lens. Well, compare that to Da Vinci's Virgin of the Rocks. So here you can see we're in 1480s with Botticelli. And by the way, I made my captions bigger so you can see them this time. And here is the Virgin of the Rocks by Da Vinci. I think you'd agree, it's still very subtle, but so much going on, so rich with detail. And of course, we're looking at the Virgin, which is the Virgin Mary. And this is not from the Bible. So this is kind of one of those tales that are sort of outside of the Bible. And this is, I think, her with baby Jesus and John the Baptist and an angel. And this is the Virgin Mary. Well, what's the message of this picture? What do you think he's trying to tell you? Or what's the feeling this painting's meant to elicit about the Virgin Mary?
Very motherly.
Motherly? Okay, good. In what sense?
Well, she's got 3 children.
Okay, so maybe protecting her children kind of thing? Yeah, and what else would you say? And I think the hand is meant to be like the protective hand. That's the message there, right? What else? What about the rocks behind her?
It's almost like a shield.
Kind of like,
Like it's like a shield almost.
okay, yeah, good. I mean, it's funny. I always think like that's almost like the church, but in kind of raw form. But these rocks, I think, are meant to provide a sense of sanctuary and safety, like a refuge. So I think that's the idea here. He's portraying her as a kind of nourishing, protective kind of person. But beautifully painted. The bright lights really, the brightness really kind of makes it feel almost like an inner light. But this angel here, you recognize this kind of face here because that's kind of what put him on the map with his mentor, which is a guy named Verrocchio. Here's Verrocchio's painting. And Da Vinci, who was part of Verrocchio's workshop in Florence, Florence is the real heart of a lot of this, including Botticelli. Da Vinci worked on a little angel there in the back. And I think you can see, well, if we compare that to that one there, yeah. And a lot of people say the angel is the best part of the painting. But this is definitely an early example of Da Vinci working on the workshop of another artist in Florence. palm tree's not so good, as we all know. He clearly didn't get out of Florence very much. And yeah, as you can see, there's, if you've been to Florence, it's a beautiful place. I don't think there's any palm trees there. You got to go to Spain. But Florence is a beautiful town. Of course, that's where the Medici, I sometimes say Medici family, they're a famous family from Florence, and they patronize a lot of this artwork, in addition to the church doing it. And so there's only about 20 paintings by Da Vinci, and I guess that might include Salvator Mundi. That's not very many. Like Frida Kahlo of Mexican art is like 400 paintings, so 20 is not that many. So this is a very interesting work of art. I'm sure a lot of you have seen this. And is this a religious painting? Is this a religious drawing? Not really intentionally, because this is him scouring these books that were probably rewritten over and over from the time of Vitruvius, who was the kind of father of architecture, who basically tried to create some sense of harmony between the physical body and architecture, right, in terms of geometry, proportion. And so Da Vinci is scouring these books that were probably dusty and decaying and had probably been translated over and over, and sees this writing by Vitruvius. Is like, hey, I can make a drawing of this, and that's what this is. So Da Vinci does a drawing based on text by Vitruvius, which had been written 2,000 years prior, which I think is just so cool that he basically, it's like there's a total continuity between 2,000 years prior and here, and so I just love that he kind of draws something based on a writing from thousands of years before. And so what is he doing here? What is he showing us? Who does he kind of look like?
Christ.
Who? Christ. Yeah, I think it's really hard for me to look at this and not think Da Vinci was trying to kind of make this sort of drawing somewhat relatable to Jesus Christ. Even the arms out. It's obviously not meant to be a picture of Christ, but I think it's really hard to look at this and not think, okay, he's trying to reconcile some of this ancient thought with Christianity, at least in kind of maybe very visual terms. But I think the idea here is the body of a human being is proportional, fits into geometry in this kind of proportional sense. And, we have a sense of balance. Our body's arm span is equal to our height. And so they're kind of, I think, trying to basically reconcile Christianity with maybe science, with the natural world. And of course, if you think of it back to humanism, the great example of, focusing on the beauty of human beings and the body as something that's not necessarily corrupt or bad, but divine. And I think you have to see this as maybe a challenge to perhaps the original sin, or maybe saying, even though we have original sin, we're still godly in a way, kind of thing. So, I think these guys are all reading different books that are all being printed and, kind of discovering things that they're trying to fit into a worldview that's, fluctuating, and I think continues to fluctuate because there's just a lot of, new books that are probably being discovered from the Arab world and from all over. And the church, I'm sure, is, the Pope every day is just crisis, in constant crisis mode at this point, because it's just all this kind of, every day someone coming to the Pope with some new, oh my God, do you know what was published today? And so Da Vinci, meanwhile, as we talked about, the church didn't allow for dissection prior to the Black Death. That was like a big no-no. I hated dissecting things. Gory, we had to dissect worms and pigs. Yeah. So he starts, now why dissect the body? Well, from an artistic point of view, it really helps you understand what you're drawing, from inside out. Even, I think, computer graphic artists today, in order to make good CGI renderings, they have to understand the body from within. You can't just sort of do the superficial. So I think we're kind of repeating the same thing that happened 340 years ago today with computer graphics. And also to go into the body means you're sort of discovering things that were otherwise unknown, right? Knowing how the body works. So in a lot of ways, art does contribute to science, or almost lays the foundation for science, because observation is so important for science. Just observing things, right? Observing the real world as a kind of way to be humble about the world. And of course, the church might have found this, might have disapproved of this before the Black Death, but I think even the church understood that we need to maybe expand the frontiers of knowledge in a way that they didn't allow for before the Black Death. So Da Vinci did a lot of, maybe he had a weird, thing for, finding cadavers and something and drawing them, but I think he was just sorely interested in drawing as a sort of basis for painting. And I think he was just sort of fascinated by people. You can see his little name there, tied, I guess he couldn't just put that on the bottom of Salvator Mundi and save everyone a lot of grief. But here's a self-portrait of Da Vinci. I wanted to see if maybe his portrait resembled Salvator Mundi at all. when you look at this, does it look at all like, well, I guess we'll get back there. It doesn't look at all like Salvador Mundi to me, so it's not like it was a self-portrait. But here is Da Vinci. Wonderful drawing, right? I mean, definitely, clearly got, as a talented guy. And here's one of his paintings. Is this a religious painting? When you look at this, you're like, oh, Christian painting? So yeah, you can see here's an artist who we're seeing examples of art, and this goes into, genie is out of the bottle, the cat's out of the bag. Once artists, can paint pictures, once the church starts patronizing your artwork, someone else might say, hey, I want a picture for my daughter. I want you to paint me standing in front of, my new home. So, artists, I think at this point are getting patronized by the church and also by, merchants or other people. And so that gives, I think, a greater sense of independence. But I think also is a little unnerving for the church because they've kind of nurtured all this talent, and now they're directing their talent towards secular subjects, non-religious subjects. So do you see anything religious about this?
The lamb.
Pardon me?
Lamb.
That looks like a possum.
That's like a mongoose.
This is a case of I should have made the caption bigger.
That's some kind of mongoose.
So I don't see anything conspicuously religious. It's not like she has a crucifix. There's nothing holy. She's not looking super pious.
Flapper.
What's that?
She looks like a 1920s flapper.
She does with that little band there.
Yeah.
No, that's funny. That's funny you say that. Yeah, she actually does. I love that. They're kind of bringing that style back, the flappers. And I think that's a fitting, comment because in a way this is kind of a independent woman kind of thing, a young independent woman I could see her, becoming a flapper in this era if there had been jazz and Great Gatsby and all that. Now, what's that?
She's not holding a dog.
Well,
or
it's not a
cat.
dog. So
No.
this is actually called Lady with an Ermine or Lady with Ermine. So an Ermine. Yeah, Ermine the Herman. I'm sure we call it
It's
Herman
just
the Herman.
interesting because it's not a feminine animal.
Okay. So we can agree this is not a religious painting. Okay. So this is not necessarily Christian art. So what do you think fills the void? And that'll be, I think, an interesting question to think about. So does that mean we're completely untethered from Christianity? So some things you might think about is well, is she still modest? Is she still pious? What is the nature of her value if it's not kind of leaning on Christianity? I think these are interesting questions to think about because there's still some cases where maybe there is some veiled Christian reference. But here I think this is probably just more a young woman in her prime, primary colors, yellow, red, and blue. Those are the primary colors. A very fitting use of color to reinforce this idea that she's a young woman in her prime. And she's kind of looking off into the distance at something mysterious, but you're not told what she's looking at. But the thing I want to focus on is this hand here, because again, we're going back to the Salvador Mundi. So if we want to kind of understand the Salvador Mundi, I would notice what Leonardo da Vinci does with hands. By the way, you got to love the way the Ermine is doing what she's doing.
Yeah,
They're
looking at the same thing.
They're both looking at the same thing. Yeah, and you know how hard it is to paint an animal that doesn't hold still. So I don't know how he did that. Clearly, she's it's her pet because she doesn't have to she's not holding it like this. So there's a fondness between the two. I'm sure it was a very wealthy or exotic animal that was rare and exceptional, and she's flexing. This is another example. Is she flexing? Flexing. So that's the first thing we see after artists kind of get away from Christian subject matters secular people flexing, showing off their money, showing off their riches, their youth, their beauty. And he saved himself a lot of work by not having to paint the background.
Yeah,
So,
Alex, in the flexing that you're talking about, there are a lot of benefactors that had paintings done, and they inserted themselves into themselves and their family into the religious pictures.
Yeah,
right? So,
yep.
So being able, you talk about secular versus Christian, and they merge them together, and you
Right.
have no idea whether these people in the
Right.
picture are actual.
yeah, and that's early Photoshop, and we kind of have to go back and figure out what the truth is now.
Right.
I think her necklace looks like roses beads.
Okay, yeah, great, yeah.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful.
when I look at this, it's, I see almost a holy light. It does seem like a purity to her, an innocence. So it does feel like it still has a kind of its heart and soul is still in Christianity. It's just sort of ostensibly she's kind of not Christian, and yet and we're kind of setting the stage for the Mona Lisa here because of course that's another famous painting by Da Vinci, which I think is similarly not a religious subject necessarily, and yet it's hard to separate one from the other. Here's a closer look at her.
But don't you also think just art itself is about beauty, and God is the author of beauty.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's
I mean,
like, when I go to a beautiful museum to see art, it's like a spiritual experience.
well, yeah, I think that's
for
like
me,
a
because you're
platonic
in the
idea.
presence of
The
beauty.
abstract purity art is
Yeah.
kind of channeling this sort of abstract and purity. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a greater.
It's a
You just
very
have to.
sacred.
Yeah, you just have to kind of understand art is not necessarily institutional religion, but rather spiritual kind of. And I think that's a good way to look at a lot of the art we see moving forward, because underlying all of the art, even today, is a kind of the idea of visualizing the invisible, right? Art is like taking what's on the inside and making it visible, right? And so that other people can kind of relate to it. So yeah, like, I think that goes into humanism, where what you have a kind of divine insight, and the artists are bringing that, the like revelation, like bringing that to people. So that's a great way of thinking about the arts as kind of ultimately still serving a kind of divine, the abstract. That's great. I mean, that's why I do this.
From the back of the room, does she have a unibrow, or is that some sort of decoration?
Okay,
What is
great.
that?
I love that you pointed that out. The more I teach art history, the more I notice things like the mustache in the 20th century with Charlie Chaplin or Hitler. It becomes a, and in this case, the unibrow makes you think of Frida Kahlo, who's a famous unibrow. But no, this is actually it wasn't enough to have one, cool Princess Leia hairband. Now she has to have two, I guess. So
That's a hairband?
yeah, I think it's like some kind. It's not a hairband. It's
like
probably.
A tattoo to me.
I mean, I don't know what it is. Honestly, I'm a man, number one, so I don't know such things. I don't know about these. What's that?
It curves down.
Yeah, you don't quite see it
follows the
here.
brow.
Yeah, what do you think? Maybe that's keeping her hair up. Maybe that's some kind
But
of.
it goes underneath her hair. Like you can see how the top band goes over her hair, and you can see that.
So this is early Botox, kind of like the wrinkles, kind of thing, something like that.
Sound.
Yeah, it is an interesting,
It's
the
not
fashion.
a shadow.
The fashion of the choices she makes here. You gotta love that she's looking away. There's something coy and fun about that. Of course, that brings us back to the Mona Lisa. And compare that to Botticelli, and I think, again, you can appreciate the subtlety of Michelangelo. They're not totally apart.
She's more modest.
Yeah, there's something more modest about, to say the least. This is absolutely not not modest. And of course, again, the hand gestures, we'll get back to that. I want you to remember the importance of hands in Da Vinci. Because for me, when I look at this, I see a lot more effort on the hands than on the face even. It looks really like he went out of his way to make that hand just so kind of, almost unnervingly kind of, I don't know, the thing about the figures is almost superhuman.
But the other thing is, in all of these other Da Vinci's, they're very high definition.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, until you get to
To Salvator Mundi,
or
right?
whatever her name is.
But already, I think you're noticing, it's interesting to see the
hands.
others.
Only the hands are
Yeah.
in high definition here. The
Yeah.
rest is kind of
Blurry.
blurry.
So remember, when this painting was kind of discovered, it went through a lot of reworking and has a lot of tears. It was really clearly subject to a lot of, wear and tear. And so some of the people on the this is a Da Vinci side of the debate, say he worked on the hand a little bit. And, experts who know his brushstroke and, down to the very, micro details, they say that he did a little bit on it. And then there's everyone else who wants to make a fortune off of the painting, who are going to happy to say whatever. And then I think a Saudi prince or someone came along and bought it for $450 million. And some people criticize that, the people who think it's not a Da Vinci because, he's so stupid. But then again, actually, I think all of that's what we're saying makes it all the more valuable because it's a great story. And so in the end, I think he probably did get his money's worth because everyone wants to go see this and decide if it's a real Da Vinci. We're not done with this yet. We'll get back to this in a moment. So what's the most famous painting in the history of art?
Mona
Mona
Lisa.
Lisa.
Right, of course, the Mona Lisa. What's the second most famous?
Yes.
Yeah, what's the second most famous painting in the history of art?
I would say the Last Supper.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's probably worldwide the most famous. I put them both here. And of course, who's the author of both?
Da Vinci.
Pretty impressive, right? So just on that alone. So is this a religious painting? Has anyone seen the Mona Lisa? Okay, that's the same people who saw St. Peter's that they saw the Mona Lisa. Jet setters. So you might remember when you go to the Louvre, or I think the Louvre, right? The Mona Lisa. You basically have like 100 people in front of you before the Mona Lisa, right? It's really
You have
hard
to
to
go
go see
there
it.
first.
What's that?
You have to go right when you walk
Yeah, you
in.
got to get there at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
Just run,
Right when the door
run
opens.
past the Wing Victory, push the little French kids aside, kick them over, and then you get to the Mona Lisa. Just stand there, like
Well,
in
they're
front of it,
details.
like with blocking yourself so no one else can get
Be
in
sure
front of
to
you.
take a picture because no one else ever has.
Yeah.
So why is this the most famous painting ever?
I don't know.
The smile.
Marketing.
Yeah.
People are just such guppies.
So-
I think it's the mystery of the smile.
So one thing I noticed about this painting is, so we saw a lot of pictures of the Virgin Mary, right? When you look at pictures of the Virgin Mary, we kind of looked at how in the different annunciations she kind of has to serve this, she's part of a script, the story of Christianity. And yet in some cases she's kind of got a little more agency, or it feels like she's standing up and kind of doing different things. And yet still with the Virgin Mary, you can't kind of separate her from her role, in the story, right? The Mona Lisa, she's not necessarily subject to kind of the story so she's sort of the first non-religious figure, right? And also she's got this inner world. I think that's what I think is so unique or so important about this contribution here, because you're looking at someone, and when I see her, I'm like, okay, she's here, she's looking at us, but she's thinking about something else.
Mhm.
And I think that's important because that makes her very relatable, because we all kind of have an inner world. And so here we're kind of looking at someone with an inner world. And this kind of goes back to art, where we were just saying, like, your inner world made external with art. And here is someone who's kind of got an inner world, and it makes you kind of like, oh, I can relate to this because she's thinking about something else. Now, what makes me say she's thinking about something else? Now, I don't even know what she's thinking about. Could be a million things, right? If I knew, then I'd have a much better, dating life.
Her stare.
What's that?
Her stare.
Her stare. So she's kind of looking at us, but not really, right? She's looking kind of through us in a way, right?
It's got a
Beyond the
smirky-
artist.
smirky
Right.
Smile.
Now, are we at eye level with her? Now, one thing with eye level, if you're at the horizon, that's eye level. So we're I think she's slightly above us. If the horizon is slightly below her eyes, then that means she's slightly above us. And I don't know if that's important or not, but I think that's part of the collection of details that helps you kind of understand the painting. What about her hand? So one hand, for me, this is the hand that's like, I'm presenting myself to you, and this is the hand that's like picking at her cuticles kind of thing while she's, you notice there, the finger down below is kind of like not obeying the script, kind of soft, doing its own thing. This is what you see in New York City when you watch people in the subway. They're doing their hair, but their foot is like, they're all prim and proper here, but their foot is just revealing that they're anxious or something. So that's what I see when I see the Virgin Mary. She's kind of got this anxious fingers down below, and that's just one. I'm not the Virgin Mary, the Mona Lisa. And so that's just one part of this that I think just gives her a kind of human quality. That in spite of all of our presentation that we go around presenting to the world, there's still like the foot shaking kind of thing. There's still the inner world that we don't have access to. So, when I look at the background, it's also a landscape painting, right? You've got this kind of familiar, it's probably Tuscany, especially you get that little bridge, you might not see that there. But it's kind of a landscape that drifts off into infinity, and the atmospheric perspective is so wonderful. I don't know why she doesn't have eyebrows. Does she
Because
not?
it was
You agree?
fashionable.
What's that?
It was fashionable.
To
People
shave
did-
eyebrows back then?
You shaved your eyebrows, which showed that you didn't need them to like catch the sweat.
Okay. Yeah, maybe less time washing yourself with no eyebrows, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure plucking one's eyebrows sounds like the most painful thing. But so you agree this is not a religious painting? And yet, she seems like a really nice, charming religious lady, though, right? She seems pious. She seems modest. She seems, it's not a Botticelli. So, one other reason I'll give for why this painting might be so famous. Oh, by the way, her smile is she's smiling at you, but almost like she's humoring, like just because she can't stand you anymore, and so she's just kind of, could be, maybe. But definitely that could be the smile of someone who's like equally amused and also kind of looking down at you kind of thing. So, one, and I don't want to get too off the beaten path here, but so some people, like a guy named David Hockney, have suggested that some of these artists from this era used optics, which is to say you project a picture, you can use a mirror to reflect the person's face upside down. And usually that means they have to sit in a really dark room, like that's the origin of the dark room, camera obscura, and they would have sunlight shining on them, and they would have a mirror, and that would reflect onto the wall, and it would trace out the picture there. And I don't think Da Vinci necessarily did that or needed to, but I think it's a very interesting question, because if you do assume that artists did some of that, then if he did that, then we're looking at the first painted photograph, which is to say he painted the mirror image, and then I think that might explain the popularity. Now I'm no art historian, I've just like any art historian would have just like stabbed me to death for just suggesting this, because you dare not suggest that Da Vinci used optics for the Mona Lisa. But later in another class we'll talk about it, because one evidence to suggest that is when you have a really brightly lit face, usually that means there was some kind of artificial sun, or a lot of sunlight was used. And so there is, I think, a possibility that why this is so popular is because we're looking at the first photograph ever. but it was painted. And that's not to criticize, say that he doesn't have talent or couldn't have done this, but I think that might be part of the explanation for why it's so popular. It feels like not a painting almost. It feels like almost like it could be like almost photographic. And so,
Do you think the hands and all these, the hands and what you're showing us of these women, to me, they all look the same.
yeah, interesting. What do you mean by that?
The fingers are spaced a certain way.
Yeah, I think that's his style and his own sort of.
The fingers are all look.
Yeah, there's
the same.
elegance to the fingers, especially the fingers, the extended fingers, like with hers here. And I'm glad you pointed that out because that's going to be something. The hand gestures, obviously. Yeah, they're very expressive. The hands are like one thing we use to express ourselves, and one window into how we are feeling on the inside. And so I think the hand is kind of more than just, he's discovering it's not just the face, it's the hands, it's the kind of puppetry of all of it. Of course, we have to get to the importance, and now look at how the hands play such a, and this is a very Italian, they use the hands like this, right? So he's got that all over the place here. This is, of course, the Last Supper by Da Vinci. I believe there is a little bit of biblical source kind of giving insight into this picture. And while they were eating, he said, "Truly I tell you, one of you will betray me." They were very sad and began to say to him one after the other, "Surely you don't mean me, Lord." So I think that's really, again, Da Vinci, looked at old drawings or old writings and made drawings of it. Well, here, going back to what we were talking about in the first class, here we're visualizing the Bible. And I think it's a lot more dramatic when you see the painting than the writing. It's a lot more, you can see why pictures have a real value to these artists, because now you're really bringing to life this moment. What's the ultimate message of the Last Supper? And before we get to that, let me show you a few other versions of it, because I think you can really appreciate how powerful the framing of this picture is compared to other versions. So here is a version before the Black Death. So we're still in that kind of flat Byzantine world. What do you think about this one? Nice painting, right? But definitely not a different framing than the Da Vinci one. Here we've got, I think, everyone, you can see everyone, but this one, no one's really freaking out the way they are in the other one, right?
Except for the person next to them.
Yeah, except the person right next to him. And you guys probably know a lot more about the specifics of the, what each person is doing and holding and where they are sitting next to him.
That would be John.
Okay, John the Baptist?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And,
John the disciple, not the Baptist.
okay,
John.
great.
Right.
Just
Yeah,
to
and look at those
clarify.
halos.
Judas would be in the bottom left here. No halo.
Yeah, okay, no halos, right? And the proportions are a little weird, but we see everyone.
Right. It's
Um,
all two-dimensional.
and here's another version. Which one? What do you think about this one?
Very two-dimensional.
Real flat, right? Now we do see everyone.
Is that person like falling over drunk on the table?
Yeah, it looks like he's kind of.
It kind of looks like he's like, like, man, let me tell you about that party last night.
I think there's many versions that have that one drunk.
I love it. Yeah, he does look.
Maybe there's a little prescription.
They're all
in there
very
to make
sad.
it candy.
They are. Look at that poor little shark face, or I don't know, shark head or something. So yeah, this is very flat. Everyone kind of got the cookie cutter face, but no one's really freaking out about. It's hard to, unless you can paint with great kind of detail. It's hard to convey that sort of paranoia or panic that everyone's feeling. So
They look
I,
very sad.
And
yeah,
Judas
and
is the
so-
only one smiling.
Yeah, here it's just like he's like, one of you will betray me, and I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
So it's not, that's just everyone's got the same sort of response.
Well, Judas is smiling.
Oh,
He
Judas
looks like
is
he's
smiling. Yeah,
laughing.
is that him there in the middle right?
No, it's where Jesus is picking his nose.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Ah,
So yeah, the artist is giving you clues about kind of what's going on. Remember, the artists take liberties, they take the text, and they have to bring it to life visually. They have to say, who's in the middle? Do I want to see the whole table? Do I want to put you in the front? Here they want it sort of theatrically displayed so you can see everyone.
Do you think it's interesting they have halos?
Yeah.
One of them doesn't have a halo.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
right.
That's
that's
Judas.
Judas
I'm pretty
to
sure
the
that's
second from the left. But I gotta tell you that what bothers me about all those halos is that they all fled, and Jesus, the only disciple at the cross, was John.
So he's the only one who
So why
deserves a
did they
halo.
get those halos?
That's because he was drunk.
I know.
He was-
Undeserved halos.
Yeah.
Okay,
Interesting
good.
though. Was this Who is this artist? I can't see the name of it.
Unknown.
It just says Last Supper.
Unknown,
Oh,
because
it says
this is that
unknown.
era before artists, felt like they could sign their names, or maybe, who knows, maybe even they couldn't write their name because it wasn't
These
like.
last two
I
pictures were
just-
quite
I
a bit
need to
earlier.
know.
Yeah, this is several hundred years earlier. So Da Vinci's is in late 1400s. This is even before the Black Death. So this is still in the age when artists haven't really pushed the boundaries of art. We're still in the flat kind of mosaic world almost. It's not mosaic, but this is. I mean, I think the most dimension here is in this beautiful fabric that we'll. Yeah, it's really. Yeah, I mean, it really is beautiful, and the folds of the robes maybe to a degree. I like how all the hands are kind of reaching out, but also you see all the food. I think that's fun to see kind of what's on the table. But let's go see another version. So here's.
And the chalice,
This one looks pretty good to me. This is in the 14th, so this is right around the time of Da Vinci's version. This is really beautiful and crisp and all that.
Pretty sure that upper room didn't look like that.
What's that?
Pretty sure that upper room didn't really look like that.
Yeah.
That looks like
But-
a painting in a church.
And so what do you think? Yeah, painting in the church, right? And so they're using the architecture. Yeah, the architecture within architecture.
Pop that thing
And
down.
I think they had a security camera in there. That looks like a painting within the whole church.
Yeah, yeah. And so, this is this is an example of them, really exquisite painting style, but maybe not the framing. I think of the Da Vinci one is a little more effective. I think we'll kind of decide that when we see it. So we go back to here. So, what about this one is so effective? Well, I think it's really that commotion.
It
All the
looks like a
people
real
really.
dinner party.
What's that?
It looks like a real dinner party,
Yeah. So what makes you say that?
because everybody's kind of mishmash.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not like everyone's kind of sitting the way you guys are kind of sitting, like kind of normal. It's real. It's grounded in realism, right? So it's no longer just sort of this, iconic picture from the Bible. Now it's actually like we are almost like you walk into the room. What did I just miss? Right? That's kind of you walk in. What happened? What?
Well, it makes them be real people because they were real people.
Right, exactly. I think it really humanizes everyone, makes them grounded, and I think it individualizes each expression. I love going through these with my students. I was having like this guy is, what's he saying, Bruce? What did he say? And he's like,
did you hear this? What
Did you hear that? Yeah, and again, going back to what you were saying about hands, this is really where his hand gestures get now fully, go to serve him very well to show the emotions. The person leaning is like, I would never do that to you, Jesus. No, me, no, probably.
But he's got, I think he's
This,
got
that's what is what Doubting Thomas doing? He's always pointing up, Doubting Thomas is always pointing up into the air. Now this guy's like, bro, I didn't do it. Whoa, no, not me, Jesus.
Right.
Just to his right. Now Jesus is calm and collected. Is that how you would be if you know someone's going to kill you? Of course not. So the power of the commotion is also reinforced by the calmness and poise of Jesus. There's like this triangle of composure. And of course, on the left side, it's almost like a wave, like people recoiling away from it. This guy here, they look very guilty on this. They all look guilty on either side. And I think that's the whole point of the picture. It's not necessarily about them being guilty, but this was painted in, I think this is actually in the Vatican. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask if you have any thoughts about the fact that he went.
Okay,
in.
thank you
It's in
for correcting me.
Florence.
Yes,
Okay, in
it's
Florence. Okay, thank you.
Is that he went
Okay,
in
but it's in a religious building? Because I think
Milan.
okay, but I think the idea is you're meant to feel like, oh, am I going to betray Jesus too? It's meant to ripple out away from the table all the way to you, beyond the canvas, and to make you feel like, oh, am I being true to Jesus? Am I also going to betray him? Am I good with Jesus? Kind of thing. I think that's the message.
There's
Yeah.
also the character that is disciples, but who is made to look like a woman. Again, he's doing that.
Yeah, I've heard that over here on the left. This kind of
That's the
figure
whole
there.
theme of the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, very
To the left
interesting.
of Jesus.
Right.
Looks it really does look like a woman.
Yeah, I agree. So
No matter how
he
much
does
you
kind
know
of
it's not,
feminize certain subjects
He
for
painted her
sure.
to look like a woman.
It's a shame that it's kind of worn off. Da Vinci was famously a little lazy with some of his paintings. He didn't finish a lot of them, and I think moved on to a lot of different projects after. And I think that's why this one suffered some of the wear and tear. So the hand gestures. Now let's go back to Salvator Mundi. It's the hands. The hands. Comparing. I'll get back to that another day. The hand of the Mona Lisa. Even the hand here. That hand is very important to the message here. Likewise here. And now, of course, we get back to Salvator Mundi. And I think really when you think about this, this is I think very much like the kind of Protestant view of Jesus, where you no longer need the kind of institutional church there as a kind of glue that holds the subject together. Now Jesus is really one-on-one with you. And what's he doing here is blessing you. I think this is Jesus, giving you a personalized blessing. So I think that might go a little ways in understanding why perhaps this painting wasn't celebrated by the church, because this is not at all, at this point, what the church is looking for. I think they're looking for a Jesus that's kind of with all the other saints, and Peter for sure, because of course he represents the church. So
Something in his hand,
Yeah.
I can't see. Is that a bowl or something?
yeah, he's
It's
got,
more
the
like
object.
boards.
There are many Salvator Mundis. There's like not many, like 10 or 20, and you can compare them. This is definitely one of the better, I think, top 3 of them. And so there are other Salvator Mundis, and you can compare them. And I think, they all have the same kind of collection of attributes. The bauble, which I think, I can't explain theologically what that is, but I think it's meant to be a symbol of, other world, or maybe having the whole world in his hand, or but I think
Is
the
it
bless.
bubble?
What's-
Is it a bubble?
Oh, I don't know. I think a bauble. I think more like some kind of.
I can't see it.
Yeah, a bauble. It's just like bubble, but
It's
harder.
just this like
It's a
clear.
roundy. It's a roundy.
Yeah, a
sphere.
round kind of glassy sphere.
It looks like a clear glass
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah. And that hand is definitely not as well done. That thumb, I don't know if you can see, the thumb is definitely weirdly kind of cropped. And the whole painting is weirdly cropped.
We
So,
have a question about the name back here in the
Does
back.
that mean savior of the world?
yeah, Savior of the World. I think so. I'd say.
No, I thought it was a man.
Salvatore Mundi.
I thought it was
or the world?
Yeah, I think, I think that, and I think for me it's fun, because if I think about Columbus and a lot of things going on in the world, there is almost like I don't know, there's something wonderfully kind of universal about this, or almost anticipating things. So what do you think? Is this a Da Vinci? Does it matter? Is this, having seen some of his other pictures, I think it's an interesting question, like, does it matter if this is an actual Da Vinci? Does it remind you of some of his other pictures that we've seen here? Let me show you one more
I
picture.
think it matters if you're Da Vinci.
Yeah, so I mean, the question might be, why did he own it? Why didn't he sign his name
Give
onto it?
credit where credit's due, intellectual property, I mean.
Yeah, and why didn't people know this was a Da Vinci until recently? I think it's an interesting question. One that we might never have answered. Now, this is not a Da Vinci, but I think this is a good picture to end on, because this is kind of like similar to what we just saw, right? It looks almost like similar picture. Beautiful hair, some guy with his beautiful hair, curly hair. But this is not Salvator Mundi. Who is this? This is Albrecht Dürer. This is actually an artist, Northern European artist. And he's trying to look like who? Yeah, I think he's doing his best to look like Jesus, right? So this is flexing to be like, look at me, I'm like Jesus, right? And so, but I think there's something more also going on here. So, one, he's looking right at you, but it's not like he's blessing you. So what is the message here? Apart from I look kind of like Jesus.
Could it be staring you down?
What's that?
Staring you down?
So, yeah, I think there's that intimacy, that kind of one-on-one, right?
It's almost like an arrogance to the hand.
There is an arrogance to him.
But his
Yes,
hands-
almost
his hands look
haughty.
like-
No.
So,
Yeah.
one, he's looking right at you, right? He has long, hair. He's showing off his beautiful coat, which I can't remember what it was made from, but let's just say ermine.
No.
That's made from
What did
ermine.
Irving do to deserve
If I
that?
remember correctly, the coat is actually made with something that is really expensive, and so, or no, actually that was the first couple. The first couple we saw, for the pregnant woman, that's the guy with really expensive. But this guy likewise, I think this is either beaver or something, one of those really expensive things. So he's showing off his expensive shirt. So you might notice, what is this? What do you think this writing is up there? Well, that's actually his name. So that's a signature, and it's not like it's on the lower left or right. He's like, I'm going to put it right next to my face. So this is a great example of a picture that has one foot in Christianity in the sense that he's kind of framing himself almost as like Jesus, but ultimately it's a picture that says, I matter. Like, you can say in an arrogant way too, but just, I matter. Like, I am the, And I think he's pointing at himself. He's also flexing, but I think this is a really important example of artists, being able to basically, paint whatever they want, because now they're not necessarily serving the church. Now, what do you paint? Self-portrait. I matter. And is what matters about him his religious piety? Is it his holiness? I think that's part of it. I think he's definitely affirming some kind of, value. But I think it's also now shifting towards materialism. And of course, that is kind of the death of religion, materialism. And so I think, maybe not. I mean, it depends. The Catholic Church, I think, was a little more materialistic than the Protestant Church in terms of needing all this sort of symbolism of religion. a teeny little bit, right? Yes, that's me trying to be diplomatic. So next class we will talk more about Michelangelo and Raphael and their real centrality to the institution of the church. But remember also the church, in addition to facing all these crises, is also dealing with, well, what do we do now with all this artwork? Do we allow them to keep painting pagan subjects and give them liberty, or do we constrict them and say no more of that? What do you think? No, big no's. But at that point, it's almost like too little, too late, because now you've got this whole new continent where Protestants are like going to eventually migrate to and start their whole kind of new journey. And I think on one of the classes we will look at maybe religious art in the United States. So at this point in 1500, this is kind of the beginning of the end in some ways of the church, because we'll be using a lot of artwork to restore its sort of supremacy in people's minds. But at that point, there's so much kind of momentum in the Protestant church that you really start seeing this division emerge around Europe between Protestant and Catholic. And I think that kind of carries over in a way till today, I think, to a degree. But I think the United States obviously kind of shifts the balance towards Protestantism. And yeah, I guess we can go back to this one briefly and just point it out. So this is a guy who has an outfit made of you have to kill a whole bunch of those little animals, maybe not Hermes or something else. But so, the question might be, so this, and I don't think you could really, maybe 1600s, 1700s, that's when the church stops being the main patron of art, right? The church, who starts patronizing art in the 1600s, 1700s? Rich people, royalty, and that will be kind of not the best moment in art history, with a few exceptions, King Henry VIII and Queen Elizabeth, a few examples of, the kings and queens who don't have any hint of religion whatsoever. They don't show any crucifixes because they're like, church, you are my threat, you are a threat to me. I want to have power that doesn't need the church, kind of thing. But then we get to the United States and the 1700s and 1800s, and suddenly these artists aren't painting rich people or powerful people. Who are they painting?
The burgers.
Who?
The burgers.
Or revolution, or even better,
Soldiers.
painting like the winged victory, not winged victory, revolution in terms of the French Revolution, right? The female symbol of the state as a kind of nourishing sort of. It's almost like not the Virgin Mary, but you could see them kind of using the morality and ethics of not just sort of who's powerful, who's rich, but like let's recalibrate art back towards the average person and use art to uplift them and to revolt against these monarchies and kings and queens. And that'll be a question when we revisit this idea of, well, is that religious art or is that secular art? And I think that's really, goes back to whether the United States, are we a religious country or are we a secular country? And though we separate church and state, I think you still see on the dollar bill to, anthems and everything, we still have an idea of God as a kind of underlying abstraction. And why do you want a government based on God and not human beings? Well, human beings are fallible, right? You don't want human beings to be the base that which we worship, but God is abstract and perfect. So, I think it's really important to kind of understand that underlying the United States is still a kind of Protestant, go directly to God spiritualism. And I think the question is whether or not materialism has kind of suffocated that, and internet and all that has kind of made us too kind of humanists, if you will, right? So we will pick up on that next class when we talk about Michelangelo and Raphael. And I'll see you guys next Sunday. And thank you again, Bruce.